I never imagined that one split-second decision in a hospital room would obliterate my entire world in 72 hours. But here I am, 2 weeks postpartum, sitting alone in my Long Beach apartment, while my husband's belongings are packed in boxes, and divorce papers sit on my kitchen counter. I'm Madison, 28, and this is how I managed to demolish my marriage faster than my C-section incision could heal. Jake and I had what everyone called a fairy tale romance. We met at a marketing conference in San Francisco, got engaged after 18 months of long-distance calls and weekend flights, and moved to Long Beach together when I landed my dream job at a digital marketing agency. Everything felt effortless, until my past walked back into our lives. Ethan was my college sweetheart, the guy I thought I'd marry until we realized we made better friends than lovers. We'd broken up 4 years ago, but never really stopped being part of each other's lives. When Jake and I first started dating, he seemed fine with Ethan's presence. But after our engagement, those casual acceptance began morphing into pointed questions. "Why does your ex need to know about our wedding venue?" Jake would ask when Ethan texted congratulations after seeing my Instagram posts. "He's just being supportive," I'd reply, rolling my eyes at what I saw as unnecessary jealousy. The pregnancy wasn't planned. I found out just 7 months after our wedding, a result of forgetting my birth control during our honeymoon chaos. While I panicked about our carefully mapped 5-year plan, Jake was ecstatic. He immediately started researching cribs and downloading baby apps before I'd even had my first ultrasound. Ethan had been living in San Jose for work, which honestly made things easier. But when he got transferred back to Long Beach during my second trimester, he immediately inserted himself into my pregnancy journey. He'd show up with my favorite smoothies from Groundwork Coffee when morning sickness hit, text daily to check on symptoms, and even offered to be my backup birth partner if Jake couldn't make it to appointments. "Doesn't Ethan have his own life?" Jake would mutter whenever my phone buzzed with another check-in text. But I genuinely thought he was being unreasonable. Having extra support seemed like a blessing, not a threat. By my 3rd trimester, Ethan was practically a third wheel in our marriage. He attended our birthing classes when Jake had client emergencies, helped set up the nursery when Jake was traveling, and somehow always appeared with dinner when I was too exhausted to cook. The breaking point came during month 8. Jake finally exploded after finding Ethan assembling our changing table while he was at work. "This isn't normal, Madison. Your ex-boyfriend is more involved in our pregnancy than some actual fathers are with their own kids." "You're being paranoid," I shot back. "Ethan is just a good friend who cares about me. Maybe if you weren't working 60-hour weeks, you'd understand that I need the support." "He's not just a friend," Jake said, his voice shaking with frustration. "He's your ex, who's clearly still in love with you, and you either can't see it or you're too addicted to the attention to care." I was furious. How dare he accuse me of emotional cheating when I was carrying his child and needed all the help I could get? 3 weeks before my due date, my water broke at 2 a.m. while Jake was in Chicago for a crucial client presentation. He immediately tried to fly back, but the earliest flight wouldn't get him home until afternoon. My contractions were intensifying rapidly, so I called Ethan without hesitation. He arrived in 12 minutes flat, threw my hospital bag in his BMW, and got me to Long Beach Memorial just as my contractions became unbearable. For the next 6 hours, he was my rock, holding my hand through contractions, advocating with nurses when I was too overwhelmed to speak, and learning breathing techniques from the midwife. When Jake finally burst into the labor room at 8 a.m., looking frantic and disheveled from his emergency flight, the dynamic immediately shifted. Ethan was sitting in the partner's chair beside my bed, and he didn't immediately move when Jake appeared. "How are you holding up, babe?" Jake asked, coming to the opposite side of the bed. But when my next contraction hit, I instinctively reached for Ethan's hand. He'd been coaching me through them for hours. I watched Jake's face fall as Ethan seamlessly guided me through the breathing technique they'd practiced together. Jake tried to take over the support role, but it was obvious he felt like an outsider at his own child's birth. After 14 hours of labor, Our daughter finally arrived at 3:47 p.m. I was completely exhausted, riding waves of relief and overwhelming emotion. The midwife cleaned her up while the OB finished my stitches. Jake had tears streaming down his face, and even Ethan looked emotional watching from the corner. "Ready to hold your baby, girl?" the midwife asked, approaching my bed with our tiny, perfect daughter wrapped in a pink blanket. This was the moment that destroyed everything, though I was too delirious to realize it then. I looked up and saw both Jake and Ethan standing there, both reaching toward us. Without thinking, still high on endorphins and exhaustion, I looked at Ethan and said, "You should hold her first. You've been here from the very beginning." The room went dead silent except for our baby's soft cries. The midwife froze, her eyes darting between the two men uncertainly. Jake's face went completely pale, his mouth opening like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. "Are you sure?" the midwife asked, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Yeah, absolutely," I said, still not grasping the magnitude of what I'd just done. "Ethan, come meet your goddaughter." The midwife reluctantly placed my newborn daughter in Ethan's arms. He looked down at her with pure wonder and whispered, "She's absolutely perfect, Maddie." I smiled through my exhaustion, feeling this strange sense of completion seeing him hold her. It wasn't until I glanced at Jake that I realized I'd just detonated a bomb in our marriage. He'd stepped back against the wall, his face a mask of devastation and disbelief. His hands were shaking. "What's wrong?" I asked, genuinely confused by his reaction. "What's wrong?" Jake repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You just gave our daughter, my daughter, to your ex-boyfriend to hold before her own father." The way he said it made my stomach drop, but my immediate reaction was defensive. "Oh my God, don't be so dramatic. He was here first and helped me through everything. You'll get your turn." "That's not the point, Madison," Jake said, his voice cracking with controlled emotion. "That was supposed to be our moment. Mine, yours, and our daughter's, not his." Ethan shifted awkwardly, still cradling the baby. "Maybe I should give her to you," he said quietly to Jake, finally reading the room. "No, don't," I snapped. "He's being ridiculous right now. Stop making this about your ego, Jake." The hurt in Jake's eyes was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Before he could respond, my phone chimed with a notification. Ethan had managed to take a selfie with the baby during our argument and sent it to me. I reflexively checked it, and Jake watched me do it. "Seriously?" he said, his voice breaking. "You're checking your phone right now?" "It's just a cute picture," I said, showing him the screen. "Look how sweet they look together." Jake stared at the photo of Ethan holding our newborn daughter, then at me, like he was seeing a stranger. "I need some air," he said, turning toward the door. "Jake, you're being completely unreasonable," I called after him. "Come back and hold your daughter." He paused at the doorway, looking back at the scene. Me in the hospital bed, Ethan still holding our baby like she belonged to him. "Is she?" he asked quietly, then walked out. The next day was a parade of visitors, lactation consultants, and medical checks. Jake stayed in the room but was emotionally distant, holding the baby in tense silence or staring at his phone. When Ethan texted asking to visit again and I said yes, Jake's jaw clenched. "I thought we'd have some family bonding time today," Jake said quietly when Ethan arrived with an expensive bouquet and organic baby clothes. "We are having family time," I replied. "Ethan's just stopping by." "That's not what family means, Madison." But Ethan stayed for 4 hours. When a nurse came in for my medication check, she smiled at Ethan and said, "Dad, would you like to try the skin-to-skin contact while I work with Mom?" Before I could correct her, Ethan laughed and said, "Oh, I'm not the dad, just the very involved best friend." The nurse looked mortified. Jake didn't say a word, just took the baby from the bassinet and sat in the furthest corner of the room. That evening, after Ethan finally left, Jake tried to have a conversation. "Madison, we need to establish some serious boundaries here." "What boundaries?" I asked, scrolling through the dozens of photos Ethan had sent me, some of which I was already posting to social media with captions like, "Baby's first day with her favorite people." Ethan being here constantly, the nurse thinking he was the father. Don't you see how completely messed up this situation is? I looked up from my phone, irritated. No, I don't. He's being supportive while you're being weirdly possessive. I'm her father, Madison. I'm your husband, and I feel like I'm being erased from my own family before it even begins. You're being dramatic, I said dismissively. Nobody's erasing you. Jake stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. I'm going for a walk, he said finally. The next morning, Jake helped me shower and pack for discharge, but he was unusually quiet. Ethan might stop by today, I mentioned casually. He said he picked up groceries and some baby supplies for us. Jake stopped folding baby clothes. Madison, I don't want him at our apartment today. Why not? He's just dropping things off. Because I want one day, just one day, with you and our daughter without your ex-boyfriend involved. I sighed dramatically. You're still obsessing over this? I thought you'd be over it by now. Over what exactly? The fact that you keep disrespecting our marriage? That you seem to care more about his feelings than mine? That you want him more involved in our daughter's life than her actual father? Now you're just being ridiculous, I said. Ethan is helping us. Why can't you appreciate that? Jake looked at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. I need some air, he said, grabbing his jacket. I'll be back before we leave. But he didn't come back. By noon, I was packed and ready for discharge, but Jake was nowhere to be found. I called him repeatedly, straight to voicemail. By 1 p.m., I was furious and called Ethan to pick us up. When we arrived at our apartment, I was shocked to find Jake's suitcase gone, along with most of his clothes and his laptop. On our kitchen island was a white envelope with my name written in his careful handwriting. I handed the baby to Ethan and tore it open with trembling hands. Madison, I can't continue this charade anymore. The past 3 days have made it crystal clear that I'm not a priority in your life or our daughter's. I've tried multiple times to discuss the inappropriate relationship with Ethan, but you refuse to acknowledge how your actions affect me. Having my child handed to another man before me was the breaking point I never thought I'd reach. I need space to determine if this marriage can survive. I'm staying at my brother's place. I'll contact you about seeing the baby. Please don't reach out for at least a week. Jake. What the hell? I breathed, dropping the letter. He actually left. He left us. What happened? Ethan asked gently, rocking my daughter. Jake's gone. He took his stuff and just left. Tears of rage filled my eyes. Who abandons their wife and newborn baby? What kind of man does that? Let me see the letter, Ethan said, reading over my shoulder. Wow, that's intense. It's completely irresponsible, I fumed. I just had a baby, his baby, and he's throwing a tantrum because I let you hold her first. Who even cares about something so petty? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I mean, I can see how that might have been important to him. Not you too, I snapped. He's being completely unreasonable. That night, I posted on Instagram, "Nothing reveals a man's true character like how he handles not getting his way. Apparently, some fathers think it's acceptable to abandon their one-day-old daughter because they didn't get to hold her first. Single motherhood, here I come. Hashtag toxic masculinity, hashtag single mom life, hashtag baby girl." The post exploded. Within hours, I had thousands of comments, shares, and messages of support from women who'd experienced similar situations. But mixed in with the support were some comments that made me uncomfortable. Girl, there's definitely more to this story. Your husband didn't just leave over holding the baby first. What aren't you telling us? Why was your ex even in the delivery room? 4 days after leaving the hospital, I got a text from Jake. I'll be there tomorrow at 3 p.m. to see the baby. Please ensure Ethan isn't there. When Jake arrived, he looked like he'd aged years in less than a week. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had several days' worth of stubble. "Can I hold her?" he asked without any pleasantries. I handed him our daughter, and his entire demeanor softened. He sat on the edge of our couch as far from me as possible and just stared at her with obvious love. "So are you done with this ridiculous tantrum?" I asked. He looked up, his expression hardening. "This isn't a tantrum, Madison. This is me finally standing up for myself after years of being disrespected." "Years? That's incredibly dramatic." "No, it's not," he said quietly. "It's been the same pattern our entire relationship. Ethan calls, you drop everything. Ethan needs something, our plans get canceled. Ethan's feelings always take priority over mine." "That's not fair," I protested. "Ethan's been helping me while you disappeared." "I left because you made it impossible to stay," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you have any concept of what it feels like to watch your wife hand your newborn child to another man first? To have that sacred moment stolen from you?" For the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Phrased that way, it did sound terrible, but I was too angry and proud to admit it. "You're overreacting. It wasn't that significant." "It was everything to me," Jake said simply. "And the fact that you still can't understand that is exactly why I had to leave." Before leaving, he told me his lawyer would be contacting me about formal custody arrangements. "Lawyer?" I repeated, shocked. "Are you actually serious?" "Yes," he said. "I'm filing for divorce." 6 weeks after the birth, I received divorce papers. Jake had filed citing irreconcilable differences, but the detailed allegations mentioned inappropriate emotional relationship with a third party. I was livid. How dare he imply I'd cheated? I called my law school friend Sophia to represent me. "These accusations are insane," I told her. "I never cheated on Jake." Sophia was quiet after reviewing the papers. Emotional infidelity doesn't require physical cheating. It means prioritizing someone else emotionally over your spouse. Based on your story, there might be validity to his claims. "What? You're supposed to be on my side." "I am on your side," Sophia said patiently. "But courts don't favor situations where one spouse maintains inappropriate boundaries with an ex." Then came the bombshell. Carter requested a paternity test as part of the divorce proceedings. "That's insulting," I hissed when he told me. "You know she's yours." "Do I?" Jake asked, looking directly at me. "Because it seems like you and Ethan have been much closer than you've admitted." As I watched him leave, I felt sick. Not just with anger at the accusation, but with a terrible spark of fear. There was one night about 11 months ago when Jake was in Seattle for a conference, and Ethan and I had gone out to celebrate his return to Long Beach. We'd both gotten extremely drunk, and my memory of how the evening ended was frustratingly hazy. When I finally worked up the courage to ask Ethan about that night, his reaction amplified my anxiety. "A paternity test?" he repeated, his face going strangely blank. Why would he want that? "Is there any reason at all that this test might not show Jake as the father?" I asked slowly. He swallowed hard. "We kissed, that's all. You passed out right after, and I took you home. Just to kiss." "Just a kiss?" I pressed, not entirely believing him. "Yes, that's it," he insisted, but something in his eyes suggested there might be more to the story. The court-ordered paternity test was scheduled when the baby was 8 weeks old. Simple cheek swabs for both Jake and our daughter. Those were the longest 5 days of my life. On day 5, Jake called. "I have the results. Can you meet me at El Dorado Park?" Jake was sitting on a bench near the duck pond, staring at the ground. I approached with the baby in her carrier, my heart hammering. "Just tell me," I said, unable to bear the suspense. He handed me an envelope with trembling hands. I opened it and skimmed until I found the conclusion. The alleged father, Jake Morrison, is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. The world stopped spinning. No, I whispered. There has to be a mistake. There's no mistake, Jake said, his voice hollow. I had them run it twice to be sure. Jake, I don't understand how this is possible. I didn't think. Stop, he said, standing up. The results speak for themselves. Please, I begged, tears streaming down my face. I honestly didn't know. I was certain she was yours. He looked down at the sleeping baby, and I saw tears in his eyes. So was I, he said quietly. But she's not mine, and you've been lying to me throughout our entire marriage. I wasn't lying, I insisted desperately. I really believed. Even if you didn't know for certain, you knew it was possible, he interrupted. I'm done, Madison. What happens now? I called as he started walking away. Now you call Ethan and tell him he's a father. The divorce will be finalized immediately. I called Ethan from the park bench, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The results came back. She's not Jake's. A long silence. Are you certain? Yes, which means she's yours, Ethan. You're her father. I need time to process this, he said finally. Can I call you back? But he didn't call back. Not that day, not the next. When I finally reached him 3 days later, his voice was distant and formal. I need to think about what this means for my future. This wasn't part of my plan. It wasn't part of mine either, I snapped. But she exists, and she's your responsibility. I know, he said quickly. I just need space to figure this out. Space. Everyone wanted space from me and the baby they'd all claimed to love so much. Ethan eventually agreed to a DNA test, which confirmed his paternity, but he was reluctant about taking an active role in our daughter's life. He offered minimal financial support, but balked at regular visitation. I'm not ready to be a father, he admitted during one of our increasingly hostile conversations. Neither was I exploded, finally reaching my breaking point. You wanted to be so involved when you thought she was Jake's baby. You were right there holding her first, playing house in my marriage, and now that she's actually yours, you're running away. That was different, Ethan muttered. I was just being supportive then. No, I said, the truth finally hitting me. You were marking your territory. You enjoyed being involved in our lives and undermining my marriage. You just didn't want the actual responsibility that comes with it. 3 months after the paternity results, my divorce from Jake was finalized. The last time I saw him was at the lawyer's office signing the final papers. He looked healthier, like he'd been sleeping again. I hope you find happiness, he said as we prepared to leave, and I could tell he genuinely meant it. I'm sorry, I replied, though the words felt pathetically inadequate for the destruction I'd caused. My daughter is 8 months old now. Sometimes, late at night when she's finally asleep, I scroll through old photos of Jake and me during our happy times. I think about all the moments when I could have made different choices. All the times I could have respected his feelings about Ethan, all the boundaries I should have established but refused to see. I thought letting my ex hold the baby first was a sweet gesture between friends. Instead, it was the final act that destroyed my marriage before we even left the hospital. The viral post that started it all now has over 500K likes and 50K comments. But the support I thought I'd found online feels hollow when I'm alone at 3 a.m. with a crying baby, no partner to help, and the knowledge that I destroyed the best thing in my life through my own stubborn blindness. If there's one lesson I've learned from this catastrophe, it's that relationships require boundaries for a reason. Not because of jealousy or control, but because respect matters, trust matters, and putting your partner first matters above all else. I just learned that lesson too late, and now I have to live with the consequences every single day.